Berkeley's a really special place, and it's a great public university, and to see it under this kind of pressure and forced to make these kind of cuts is very sad. And it's, but let's be fair, it's not just Berkeley. It's the whole state is in trouble, and it's really a reflection of the lack of leadership and the poor decision making by politicians. And I just hope that California will get it together and not allow this great institution to be too badly damaged.
And if you were to reform the education system in California, where would you start?
Where would I start? Well, I mean,
experience you've had.
The problem with that question is that so much of it does come down to resources, and if you don't have the money, it's hard to make the reforms. Assuming we had the money, and hopefully one day again that we will be in more flush times, I would say you really got to start by doing some of the things I talked about today, which is looking at bringing in services to high-need schools to address some of the basic needs of children, and then focus in on really recruiting a generation of talented principals, teachers to run the schools. So that's what we really need good, smart, committed people with our kids.
After an introduction like that, I can only disappoint you now, right? It's really good to be here. It's good to have Julian do the introduction. Good to see so many friends, even in the few hours I've been here, just walking on campus, and also experienced so many memories from having lived and worked here for almost 20 years. So Berkeley really holds a special place in my heart, and still does. And it's sad now to hear about Berkeley, kind of where it is, not just Berkeley, but California. I spoke at a conference in LA on Wednesday of the California School Board Association, and Jack O'Connell, state secretary, I guess the secretary or superintendent, was in the audience, so it was good to have him there. And I said, California is like a bullet train, a beautiful bullet train, headed toward a precipice. And the people driving the train are messing around, even as they see the precipice get closer and closer, and no one is taking control to turn the direction. And you see that in so many different areas. You see the dismantling of the great public university system. We warned them a while ago that you keep putting money into the prison system, expanding the number of prisons the way you do, you're not going to be able to educate the people. When I came here in 1981, community college was free. It cost $700 a semester less to go to Cal. Okay. Things have changed. And so it's sad to come back in many ways, to see where things are, and to see the ways in which politics really have poorly served the state and left the situation that seems so untenable right now. You're faced with the choice of recycled politicians like Jerry Brown, and I have to say, it's hard for me to say good things about him, because I saw him when he was mayor of Oakland. I saw when he was actually at the end of his governorship of California, when he sprayed malathion in Oakland, supposedly to get fruit flies, and we had no farms in Oakland. I was like, why are we getting sprayed? And I remember just before I left Oakland, and he said he wanted to take control of the Oakland public schools. And he wanted appointments on the board. I said that we had dinner together, and I said, before you, and he said he's going to create charters everywhere in Oakland, charter schools. And I'm not necessarily against charters. I said, but before you create more charters, why don't you look at the charters you have? Because some of them are really bad. He said, really? I said, yeah, really. But Jerry Brown was the kind of person, he couldn't even pay attention to one thing for more than 10 seconds, and he was on the new topic. And so I'm just so concerned that the caliber of leadership comes from the state. I mean, you turn to a superhero, a fake superhero. and where do we end up? So, I don't know, it's discouraging. And I'll come back to that in a moment. I want to say something about Julian that's important, because my goal tonight was not to discourage, but to try to inspire. And Julian did some inspiring work when he was my student. He didn't describe it, but I actually wrote about it in my book. I saw some people had the book there, City Schools. And, and you'll see Julian's mentioned there in one of the chapters. And that's because the project he did for my course was very interesting. He went to his old high school to do the research. And he started out by asking people, I'll paraphrase, I may not have it exactly right, who they thought were the smartest students at the school, who they thought were doing best well. And everybody said, it's Asian students who are doing the best at this school. Even Asian kids who weren't doing well, they said, look, I'm not doing well, but it's really the Asian kids, I'll tell you. I'm the exception here. And then he pointed out that the average GPA for Asian students at school was about 1.8. And he was trying to understand, how could it be that there was this vast discrepancy between the reality of how well kids were doing and this assumption that Asian kids were somehow all high achievers. And what was important about that, I felt, is it challenged a lot of assumptions about, this connection between race and achievement, between culture. How many of you have heard this idea that if just Asians are just naturally gifted students, particularly in math? Well, I pointed out to you a while ago that at Galileo High School, where almost 80% of the kids were Chinese, for a long time they had a 50% dropout rate. And they weren't dropping out because they weren't sufficiently Chinese. This idea that race and culture drive achievement has been around for so long and is still there. And it's part of the reason why people aren't more angry about the fact that we have these wide disparities in achievement that correspond with race and ethnicity and language and culture and class. Because if you believe the problem lies in people's culture or their genes, then you don't believe there's a lot schools can do about it. And for the longest time, in places like Berkeley, and I spent a lot of time at Berkeley, both as a board member and then studying Berkeley, I'm trying to do something about it, I realized the biggest obstacle to doing anything about it were the beliefs that people held about why it was the way it was. And the fact that more people weren't outraged. That in a city like this, they could produce a good school for all the kids, not just those who came from affluent, well-educated families. But like many of you, I got into education because I thought it was a place where we could make a difference. And I did it because I knew when I went to college, I went to Brown actually as an undergrad, that I was not unique. I knew that although I came from a working class family, neither of my parents graduated from high school. But they managed to send all 6 of their kids to college, some of the best colleges in the country. I knew that I wasn't so special. I knew there were lots of people like that who simply didn't have the opportunity. And to me, the question was, how do we expand that opportunity? Because for many people, the only chance they have for access to a better life is education. So education is their best hope. And I was drawn to the idea of doing something practical, something that could actually make a difference. And so while I was still an undergrad, I was asked to work as an assistant to a kindergarten teacher, as a part of an ed psych course I was taking. And the kindergarten teacher said, your job is to work with some really hyperactive boys who have trouble sitting still. I'm thinking to myself, how hard could that be? That's a piece of cake, right? I said, let me see the 5 rows. They're so cute, I'll tell them. I got this. Well, it took me one session to realize a lot harder than I thought. Right? These boys, they had a lot of energy, more energy than I imagined, and getting them to sit still to even listen was a real challenge. But without any training at all, I came up with a plan that actually worked. The next time I came to the school, instead of trying to get these kids to sit still and listen to me, I brought a football with me. And we played football for about half an hour, until I tired them out. And then we sat down and we talked. And we talked about what they liked, what they didn't like about school, about what they liked to read, and started to bond and build connections. And I learned 2 things then. First thing I learned was you have to work with the energy of children, not try to crush their energy. And secondly, that you have to build relationships. Because if you build a relationship, then teaching them becomes so much easier. Because teaching is not something you just do to someone. Teaching is something that we do together, we learn together. And you have to build that relationship. I learned that as a 19-year-old.